Welcome to Opinion Journal. I'm Mary Kissel. How do voters perceive the top presidential candidates? We've got some surprising numbers for you. Wonderland columnist Dan Henninger joins the show. Dan, this is a Quinnipiac poll just out in these last hours. We're going to put some word associations up on the screen for Hillary Clinton. Call it the Hillary brand. The first three words that voters come up with are liar, dishonest, and untrustworthy. This has to have the Clinton campaign worried.
I actually think it would have Democrats worried. The Clinton campaign doesn't seem to worry about much of anything. But, Quinnipiac said these were just raw numbers. They just asked people, and the number of people who said, for liar, it was 178, dishonest, 123, untrustworthy, 93. And then below that, you get experience, strong, Bill, woman, smart, and crook, and untruthful. It kind of adds up to a fairly negative view, and her negatives in these polls are beginning to climb some. And so I think, again, the Democrats, they can gut it out, I suppose. I mean, we're going to talk about the Republicans. I suppose the ultimate Hillary argument is, you think we've got problems, look what's going on.
Yeah, well,
let's
look at the word association with Donald Trump. The first three words that come to mind: arrogant, blowhard, and idiot. That's not much better than Hillary, is it, Dan?
Right, not much better at all. You get down here to 18 and there's a word with an A in front of it, which we're not going to mention on this program.
It's a family show.
Well, the Quinnipiac poll is interesting because when you get into the details of it, some of the stuff that emerges for both Hillary and Trump is kind of fascinating. They put Trump up against both Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders. And guess what? He loses in all three matchups. He even loses against Bernie Sanders, 44 to 41%.
And yet he's leading the polls by quite a long ways. Let's look at the guy who was supposed to be the front runner here, Dan, and that was Jeb Bush.
Yeah.
Now, the first three words that you think of when you think of Jeb Bush, the only one that seems to be bad there is the name Bush, because the other two are family and honest. So why isn't he doing better?
Well, he's just being swept up in the Donald Trump riptide at the moment, as is everyone else. I mean, look, we are a long way from the primaries, which start next February. I think people are expressing a lot of emotion, a lot of anger right now, and they're kind of attaching themselves in ways they think doesn't have very many implications for ultimately electing a president. I suspect once we get closer to the real events, the primaries, that a lot of these races are going to tighten.
No, it will tighten, but I wonder if that Hillary brand is going to change. I guess we'll see. Wonderland columnist Dan Henninger, thanks very much. Turning now to some rare good news. The College Board has revisited its advanced placement history exam and rewritten it to take out that liberal bias. Wonderland columnist Dan Henninger has written about that in his column today. Dan, why is this such a big deal?
Well, if I may correct you, Mary, liberal bias, we would have been so lucky if there had been liberal bias. This was left-wing, virtually neo-Marxist bias in the original guidelines that were published last year for the AP U.S. history exam. And it was a version of U.S. history that regarded the Europeans coming to America as basically delivering disease and pestilence to the American Indians and destroying their way of life. It described the Industrial Revolution as basically something that damaged a lot of workers. And it emphasized gender, identity, class, and ethnic association.
So essentially everything that's being taught in college today.
Yeah, in no small part, that's true. And now it had seeped down to the high school level.
So why would the College Board make such a U-turn?
Well, let's describe the U-turn. The new guidelines are very even-handed. I mean, some of these things are still in there, but the other side of the story is in there as well. So people may disagree, but at least you're giving a kind of neutral, fair, and if I may say so, the founding fathers who were not in the original guidelines are now in these guidelines.
Well, thank goodness for that. But what would make them change their mind like this? I mean, this is kind of embarrassing for the College Board, isn't it?
Well, opposition to the left-wing guidelines began to emerge in the states. In at least 5 or 6 states, Georgia, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Nebraska, Tennessee, Texas, and Colorado.
Colorado, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, these are not all southern states, and Nebraska. And the legislatures, the parents began to say, look, if you're going to push us in this direction, we are maybe going to push you out of our system. In other words, substitute their own advanced placement courses for what the College Board was producing. And I think the College Board saw a real threat here to its monopoly over AP testing.
So their livelihoods are threatened and they change course. But Dan, it's fine for high school students to get a more balanced reading of U.S. history, but then they go out into the world and they're told America is a racist place by the media.
They go to college.
They're told by the administration, we know America isn't a force for good in the world. So, isn't there a lot more?
One may argue, Mary, that those high school history courses are the real formative years. I mean, it's unlikely that you're going to go to any big college today and find a course that's teaching American constitutionalism, or at least the kind of history that one used to get in high school. And the idea that they were going to turn high school U.S. history into simply a course in identity politics was, I think, a real threat. And conservatives should regard this as a victory for pushing the whole process back towards the center where it belongs. And I must say, I have to give the College Board credit for making this sort of accommodation.
Give the College Board credit. Dan Henninger, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you, Mary.
More to come on Opinion Journal. Stay tuned. Donald Trump is leading the pack when it comes to the Republican presidential nomination, and he's running on a very anti-immigrant platform. How is that affecting other candidates in the race? The Libra Initiative Executive Director Daniel Garza joins us on set this time. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you, Mary.
Are some of the other candidates parroting Trump because they believe that immigrants aren't good for the country, or is this simply a political move? I'm thinking of, for example, Scott Walker.
I think they see the polls and they're sort of spooked by it, and so they're drawn into the conversation because they feel it's appealing to new voters, or at least a more expansive voting bloc. There's a danger in that. The narrative, I think, that it has to be respectful. I think it has to honor the contributions of immigrants and what they've contributed to America in order for them to, I think long-term if they actually pull out the nomination.
But there's a practical calculation here, isn't there, Daniel? Because can the GOP really win without the Latino vote?
It's going to be really difficult, Mary. Look, 2014 was very successful for the GOP. That's because a lot of their candidates engaged, actually earned the vote of the Latinos. They went into the communities and did the hard work of actually engaging Latinos. The Democrat Party actually got burned because they didn't do that. Their candidates actually did not do Latino outreach. In fact, Udall, for example, in Colorado, banked his entire investment on the war on women, and he paid a heavy price and actually was criticized by the Latino community for not doing anything.
Now, your organization is out in the grassroots talking to Latino voters. How are they reacting to Trump? What are you hearing?
It's been very negative. The polls indicate that there's a high unfavorability towards Donald Trump's proposals, policy proposals. I mean, look, it's like, Hercules attacking the Hydra. He's only created, more heads, ugly heads here, where now you have to deal with, seizing remittances to folks in their country of origin, mass deportation issue, and then, of course, he wants to do end birthright citizenship, which is unrealistic. And so it's created more unresolvable issues for the other GOP candidates and sort of, I think, dip the conversation into an abyss where you don't want to go.
It is in an abyss. But let's turn to the other side of politics, the Democrats. What are they doing as Trump blows up the right? Do they just sit back, or do they actively go out into the community and say, look, the Democrats have a better message for you as a Latino voter?
They should absolutely take advantage of the opportunity instead of sitting back and seeing this narrative play out, which has not been a positive one, or at least the tone and the content on policy. They cannot make the same mistake they did in 2014. I mean, they put all their money on battleground Texas because they thought they would turn Texas purple, and they lost big on that bet.
So what are the opportunities then for Democrats or for Republicans? What are the key states that they need to focus on when it comes to the Latino vote?
So Florida is going to be critical. North Carolina is also going to be, because of course, the burgeoning Latino population there. Virginia Ohio, Colorado, and Nevada are going to be the key states in the electoral map where there is a significant Latino population, and they're 50-50 states. And so if you can control the narrative and drive the conversation, showcase your guy and undermine the other guy, you're going to do very well, and Latinos will reward you if you connect and if you relate with them.
Okay. Well, we're going to follow the story closely. Daniel Garza.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks for joining the show. We're going out to Jackson Hole next. Stay tuned. Central bankers are gathering in Jackson Hole, Wyoming today and through the weekend to talk about a lot of important issues, the stock market fall, but most importantly, interest rates. What's going to happen there? New York Sun editor and author Seth Lipsky joins the program. Seth, you've got an op-ed in this morning's paper talking about interest rates. What should central bankers take into consideration when they're making decisions about that key price in our economy?
Well, I mean, they take into consideration a lot of things. In my view, they ought to focus on gold. But what's happening in Jackson Hole is very unusual this time. There are two the Fed has a regular annual conference there, hosted by the Kansas City Fed. It's a major event. It's been going on for 31 years, I think. This year, they have two simultaneous independent counter conferences, one of a left-wing group called Fed Up, which wants very low interest rates and easy money with a goal of trying to use that to increase employment, and the American Principles Project, which is a free market constitutionalist organization that wants honest, sound money linked to gold as a route to full employment, is holding its own conference to see whether central banks are the problem.
Well, it looks like Bill Dudley, the president of the New York Fed, is siding with that left-wing group because he came out just in these last hours and said that he thinks the prospects for a rate hike are, quote, less compelling today. What do you say?
Well, I think that is the left-wing view. I'm more in the David Malpass Wall Street Journal editorial page camp. But the real what makes this also particularly juicy at the moment is that Congress has started to get involved in the question of whether the monetary policy, the regime of fiat money with no link to gold or any other specie, has been part of the problem, and that has enabled the pursuit of policies that have kept this us trapped in this ultra-long Great Recession.
But do you think that Congress should get involved in what the Federal Reserve does?
I think the Congress should get involved in monetary policy. The Constitution, which every one of these people is sworn to support, grants the monetary powers to Congress, the power to borrow, the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and to fix the standard of weights and measures. These are the monetary policies, and they belong to Congress. To say that the Congress shouldn't get involved is kind of absurd.
Should this Jackson Hole conference be talking about the stock market? Should that be something that the Fed should care about?
The Fed has a mandate of stable prices and full employment, and that's what it should be focusing on. The question is whether it should have an employment mandate at all, or whether it should be focused mainly on prices. The employment mandate only came in 1978 with Humphrey Hawkins, and we're still above the average unemployment rate that existed when we were on a gold exchange standard under Bretton Woods.
Well, it sounds like there's an awful lot to talk about at this conference. We're going to watch that news very closely. The New York Sun's Seth Lipsky, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks a lot, Mary.
You can follow me on Twitter or email us at opinionjournallive@WSJ.com. I'm Mary Kissel with the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Thanks for watching.